What's the scariest medical symptom you've ever had that turned out to be nothing? My skin from head to toe itched and burned like I had a 2nd degree sunburn, but it looked normal. 6 months of extreme uncomfortableness and pain. A dozen plus doctor's apps. 50 different blood tests, nothing. Changed laundry detergent, shampoo, soap, all to hypoallergenic and still in pain. Eventually I ended up on a week-long visit to a friend of mine out of town and it almost all cleared up and was in very little pain. Came home, took a shower and it returned with an extreme vengeance. Went and checked for hard water and water checked fine. Then I noticed a brown ring around the drain. Went and flushed the hot water tank and it comes out light brown. Turns out there was 2-3 inches of this fine brown silt at the bottom of the tank, and every time I took a shower I was being sandblasted from head to toe. At least you probably got really clean. I pass out when I yawn and stretch, and have scared many people when it happens. Went to the doctors and was told don't stretch when you yawn then. This isn't a medical symptom, it's a feature. Instant nap. Sounds pretty freaking awesome. Not me, but a close friend told me a story about how he had a very intense, sharp pain on one of his testicles. He wanted to give it some time, but the pain didn't subside at all. A few hours later, fearing cancer or testicular torsion, he went to get it checked out. The doctor leaned in, made a few observations, and said, "Yup, just like I thought, you have a pimple on your testicle." This happened to my so. He got a really bad ingrown hair that went from aching to all out hurting. He was convinced he was dying. When I pulled the 8-inch long hair out, I wish I was kidding. He was fine. I had what I thought to be blood in my stool. WebMD convinced me I had butt cancer, so off to the hospital I went. Turned out, I had just drank entirely too much cherry coke from Sonic. They use the bright red cherry syrup. I am not a smart woman. With WebMD you're never more than 3 clicks away from cancer. I had a random onset and blinding pain right behind my forehead. Didn't go away, so I went to the doctors. Sitting in the waiting room, it's getting worse and worse, and it gets to the point where I'm on the verge of vomiting from the pain. See the doc, and he asks if I have blurry vision. Yes. If the pain right here. Yes. Is my hearing dulled? A bit. Do I have a runny nose? Yes. I'm thinking, frick, I have a brain tumor. He says it's sinusitis. Stick your head in a bucket with Vicks and water for 5 minutes and you'll be fine. Did it. It worked in 1. Ugh. Sinus infections are terrible. Such pain. Never had one that bad. I have this strange thing with my eyes where at random points, everything will look like it's shaking right to left, back and forth. It's very weird. I'll be just sitting here reading or playing Xbox and everything will start shaking. I went for CAT scans. Doctors even considered I had a tumor, but it turned out they just told me that everybody's body has a different way or unique thing about it, and this could be my thing. Strange answer and a strange symptom I have going on. That's called nystagmus, and when you're playing Xbox or something similar with a certain refresh rate, especially in the dark, the flashing lights can just trigger it. Chest pains. I thought I was having a heart attack. My left arm had shooting pains up and down it, and it was tingling. My chest was hurting really bad, and it felt like my lungs were in a vice. Turned out it was a combination of muscle strain and pinched nerves. I have this problem. There's a chronic issue in my back that wraps to my chest and often my arm on the left side. I'll be screwed if I ever do have a heart attack because I'm so used to it I just pop my NSAID and Robex and go back to what I was doing. I'm a healthy, in shape 20-something dude. One time I was at college and my chest started to hurt. Bad. Not only did it hurt, but I felt like I could feel my heart beating, and it was beating wrong. I started to panic and thought maybe I could feel one of my forearms going numb. I got a friend to drive me to the ER. Waited in line, chest killing me, certain I was having some sort of strange heart attack. Long story short, once they asked me what I had eaten that day and the night before, it became very clear that it was just bad heartburn. I'd never had heartburn before, so I didn't know what it felt like. I guess PBR, Buffalo Wild Wings, and pizza will do that to you. When I was 17 or so I had chest pain on my left side and thought I was having a heart attack or something. Turns out my lung farted and I had a lung collapse. Chest pain ain't nothing to frick with. I once took a dump and then almost threw up and passed out. Turns out it's a thing called esophageal syncope and it can't really hurt you. It can cause you to be found pantsless and passed out by your unfriendly neighbors in their bathroom that you broke into. I had terrible pain in my abdomen one day, doubled over with pain and unable to drive. My father picked me up from work to rush me to the doctor, who ruled out appendicitis and gave me an injection into my belly. It didn't help though, so after waiting an hour at home for my abdomen to stop cramping, my mother drove me into hospital. I was rushed from one room to the other, x-rays, US, CT, gyn, and a lot of waiting in between, all the while being in terrible pain and no doctor ready to give me something for it. With time passing I was answering the frequent question, "You sure you aren't pregnant?" ever more aggressive with "No, I'd be a medical sensation if I was." My pains started at about 8:30 am. At 10 PM they finally gave me a painkiller intravenously. From the second the effect reached me, my pain was gone and didn't come back. My luck, for they would have cut me open in the night if the painkiller hadn't worked. After all, it obviously was only an intestinal loop lying wrong and causing the pain. Nothing really severe, but boy, I never want to be in that kind of pain again. I've had this before. Turned out to be the absolute foulest gas I'd ever had in my life. I suspect that I had some sort of intestinal blockage and things just rotted. Well, my oncologists gave me a good news and a bad news. That big back mole at the base of my penis isn't dong cancer. The bad news is my first girlfriend cheated on me and gave both of us HPV. A couple of years ago I noticed that I couldn't shut my other eye and the other side of my nose, mouth and eyelid were hanging. So I googled the symptoms and the first results were a stroke. And the symptoms matched almost perfectly. So I went to the hospital and it turned out to be just Bell's palsy, facial paralysis, which was cured in a couple weeks with antibiotics. Everywhere I went I was having phantom smells. I could smell cookies baking. Other people could not. At the gym, in the shower, walking down the street, the smell of cookies was haunting me. I thought I had a brain tumor or a mental illness manifesting. Turns out it was my facial moisturizer. Playing with my nuts and thought I felt a lump on one of my balls, so thought it best to go get it checked out by my doctor. Turned out it was something that was meant to be there. My butthole was bleeding when I was about 8 months pregnant. It was a lot of blood, like a whole lot. At first I didn't know where it was coming from. Just went to poo and it was like I started my period down there. Being 8 months pregnant I freaked the frick out. I had internal hemorrhoids and all the extra blood my pregnant hormonal body was pumping caused me to bleed more than normal. I also got a lovely case of external hemorrhoids as well. The joys of pregnancy. I had been lifting furniture and afterwards found a small bump on that joint area between the leg and groin and thought I had a hernia. Doctor told me it was just a swollen lymph node right after he grabbed my junk and gave me a thorough exam. On my 20th birthday, I woke up with a huge lump on the side of my neck. I freaked out. I had never had a swollen lymph node before. I started having chest pain on Saturday evening once. It intensified all night and I was having trouble breathing by the time I went to bed. Woke up very early to a pain so intense that I nearly fainted when I stood up. Extreme pain. Even more pain when I was breathing heavily. Went to the ER as a 20-something male experiencing extreme chest pain. I was rushed in, EKG, x-rays, nurses and doctors everywhere, the whole 9 yards. Turns out I had pleurisy, inflammation of the membrane around my lungs. In my case, probably caused from getting hit in the ribs playing soccer. It's apparently pretty common and by no means life-threatening. The doctor told me to go home and take ibuprofen. I felt pretty foolish, even more so when the bills came. No reason to feel foolish. It's not like most people would have a roommate who's a medical professional around to say, "Sure, why? That's just pleurisy." I had some large, ugly, infected looking blisters on my neck, ear, and elbow. Kinda looked like I was hit with a blister agent. Turns out I had scratched mosquito bites with crap under my fingernails. I repair sewer pipelines for a living in case you're wondering. What kind of crap could cause literal crap? I see. My right nut ended up being about twice, almost 3 times, the size of my left in high school. Panicked and had ultrasounds and MRIs done and all that jazz. Turns out I just have a big right nut. My right nut is 2 times the size of my left. Their names are Biggie and Smalls. About a year ago, my gums turned bright red and were insanely swollen. So swollen you couldn't even see my teeth. Then all the skin on the roof of my mouth basically died and regrew. I couldn't eat or swallow anything without a crazy amount of pain. I saw 4 separate doctors, one of which asked me if he could take pictures of my mouth and send them to another doctor across the country. I seriously thought I was patient 0 and I would never find out how I would survive the zombie apocalypse because it started with me. Ended up never finding out what it was, but I'm not a zombie. Breast lumps are always scary, whether they are cancerous or are just an interesting part of your body. Had one when I was 12. Freaked me right the frick out. I decided not to tell anyone in the hope that if I simply pretended it didn't exist, it would cease to. Eventually it went away, so I guess it worked, but I don't recommend that course of action, haha. At 28, my internal organs hurt so bad, I thought I was finished. I got a nasty rash that left permanent scars on one side of my body. Turned out I only had shingles, because I had chickenpox when I was a kid. There was no vaccine against it yet. Immunize your dang kids. Also, shingles vaccines. Everyone that has had chickenpox should get one because shingles freaking hurts. I remember when my grandma had it, she said it was like her body was on fire. When I was in 3rd grade I started coughing up blood. It was strep throat, and while that isn't nothing, my mom was convinced her little girl was dying, making me think I was dying. Compared to a dying child, strep throat is nothing. Kids occasionally die of strep infections that are left untreated. I was in class a few years ago when my vision blurred, and I started slurring my speech and speaking in half gibberish sentences all of a sudden. A doctor was concerned enough to order an MRI for fear that I had a brain tumor. Turned out it was just a silent migraine. If you've never heard of silent migraines, look them up. They can be terrifying. The year was 2000. I was 12 years old. My parents had finally decided I was trustworthy enough to stay home alone while they worked during the summer. I had a sharp pain that started on one side of my stomach and moved across to the other side, eventually becoming a stationary stabbing pain that was unbearable. I had to call my dad, who came home from work, to take me to see the doctor. It was diagnosed as appendicitis and they realized they had to rush me into surgery before it burst. So here I am, lying on a gurney as they are coordinating with the ER to remove my appendix. Suddenly, I let out the biggest fart of my life and was free to leave. I still have my appendix inside me. TL. DR. Almost had surgery. Farted. Went home. Super heavy bleeding. Ended up sitting in the bathroom of a Eurail train. Had to wash my clothes in the sink several times to get rid of the blood. Vision and hearing were spotting out. Cold sweats. Then I stumbled off the train and up chucks into the nearest waste bin. My travel companion friend got me into a cab to go to a hospital. They did a very thorough, intrusive, awkward exam, only to find that there was no damage to anything and the bleeding had already stopped. Literally could not comprehend how I was having what looked like a miscarriage, without having possibly gotten pregnant. Asked my regular doctor eventually, but to no avail. To this day, I have no idea what the frick it was. Terrifying as all heck. You could have had an ovarian cyst that burst. Vertigo. Very scary when you constantly think the world is spinning around you, but the symptoms were very easy to treat and a few months in a rehabilitation program and I was like normal. Woke up in the middle of the night unable to move, shaking, etc. I thought I had a seizure. Turns out I just had a really mild form of sleep paralysis as a symptom from new asthma medication. Woo. Shortly after midnight, Christmas morning, 1 year, I wake up, feeling intense stomach pain and a whole lot of nausea. I lurch my way over to the bathroom and proceed to throw up for several minutes straight, long enough that I eventually can't stand because I don't have enough oxygen. It's all coming out deep red, the exact color of my blood, with lots of black clots in it. It should be noted at this point that my family has a history of severe digestive issues. Crohn's disease is something we've all watched out for signs of. Naturally, to my sleep-addled brain, this is the first thing that comes to mind. I go back to bed, feeling rather worried and still feeling pretty sick. The next morning I wake up, still concerned, but feeling better. Head to the dining room, where my eyes land on the package of Oreos, holiday Oreos, with a bright red filling, that I'd been scarfing down in large quantities while doing my last minute gift wrapping the night before. I haven't eaten those since. TLDR. Thought my guts were falling apart from the inside, but I just had too many funky Oreos. I did this exact thing once with blueberry waffles. I thought I must have been dying because it was all red. Palpable mass in my abdomen. It turned out to be a 7cm fibroid tumor on the top of my uterus. While it wasn't nothing, it wasn't serious. It, and its 10 friends, were removed a few months later. Over the course of a month I had varying degrees of blood in my stool and severe stomach pains. The first symptom was black stool, which I found out was an upper GI bleed. After that it would lighten in color until you could clearly see the streaks of blood instead of it being a solid dark color. And finally I had a week where I was just bleeding out of the butt all the time. Turns out I had swallowed some kind of foreign object that just tore up my insides on the way out. Also, I now know exactly how much rubber tubing you can shove up my butt. It's many more feet than I previously would have guessed. I have tachycardia and intermittent heart palpitations. Have for as long as I can remember. I've gone to doctors for it before. I've even had EKGs, but all they've ever told me is, yeah, my heart's weird, but I don't seem to be dying or anything, so it's probably fine. I get heart palpitations from time to time and everyone says it's no big deal. Scares the crap out of me, though. During grad school, the whole right side of my head went numb one afternoon. From mid-neck to the top of the scalp, including right ear. It was the weirdest sensation. I'd been feeling vaguely sick for a few weeks. Thought I was still fighting off the flu. The doctor at the university clinic said it was nothing. Probably slept wrong or twisted my neck. That it would pass in a few days. They considered it non-serious since I wasn't in pain. 2 days later, when my throat started hurting worse than a bout of strep, I could hardly swallow, and I found 3 lumps in my neck. I went back to the clinic thinking I had some kind of cancer. The intake nurse thought I might have tumors in my neck, which did little to calm me down, but ended up with the best result. The seriousness of what the nurse said got the lead doctor at the clinic, instead of the first doc, to finally check me. He determined I had nerve damage from a bad case of mono. Lymph nodes were so swollen they cut off the nerves, followed by swelling in the throat. A lot of steroids and bed rest cleared it up, but it took 6 months before I could feel much of the right side of my head, and almost 10 months to get full sensation back in my right ear. Overall, not too serious, but having your head be numb is probably the scariest medical thing I've ever experienced. A university clinic was responsible for the worst misdiagnosis I've experienced so far. Went in with a variety of symptoms. It was 12 years ago and the details are a bit hazy now, and they gave me amoxicillin and told me to get rest. 2 days later it was much worse. Visited my doctor who did a quick test and told me I had both mono and strep throat. Did a lot of sleeping that next week. Every time I Google my symptoms I end up with either cancer, STD, brain tumor, broken testicles, etc. It turns out to be nothing every time. Cancer, AIDS or motor neuron disease. Google will only ever take you to one of those 3. When I was 15 I found a shitload of my dead grandmother's Percocet. So I brought them to my friend Ray's house and we hung out in his room all afternoon crushing the pills up and snorting them while trying to play GTA 3 without nodding off. We were also repeatedly shotgunning Coors Lights on his patio. We eventually lost the energy to play video games and just sat on his couch watching QVC. And then some ad came on for the Tylenol helpline. It had all these warnings about not taking pills while drinking and it showed pictures of people who had jaundice, saying that your skin turns yellow when you're having life-threatening liver problems. I started looking at my hand and was convinced that it was more yellow than normal, so I called my dad and confessed what I'd done. He picked me up and drove me to the emergency room, where I was basically told that I was fine and should not take drugs again. On the way home my dad pulled the car into a warehouse parking lot and told me I'd have to get out and walk home. He was furious. He got out and struck me repeatedly with a set of jumper cables and then he drove off. I woke up one morning with searing pain down my left arm, followed by weakness and tingling in my thumb and index finger. Turns out, totally normal pregnancy symptom. Being pregnant is like having your whole body revolt at once. I can't recall the name of the disease, but this happened 4 or 5 years ago. I was in the military applying for the police. BTW, I am not American. I needed some exams, like an EKG, blood work, chest x-ray, etc. But the EKG showed symptoms of a really nasty chronic cardiac disease, already on level 2. In the military hospital they ended up not signing my exams because of it. I went to a private practice to get new exams and see if they could sign up my medical exams. I needed documents vouching for my good condition to be able to do the physical tests to join the police. I had already passed the written tests. I took my ECG reading to that doctor and he told he couldn't sign anything based on that ECG. It was too dangerous. He asked me if I got tired really fast and had low blood pressure and stuff like that. I said actually it's the other way around. Even though I am a bit bulky, I have plenty of stamina for a person of my weight, and my blood pressure is normal. I was 84 kilograms at the time, 175 tall, and he raised an eyebrow. Still didn't get me my exam signed and gave me 2 or 3 numbers of some top cardiologists he knew. I left the clinic dead worried. A 27-year-old soldier that jogged 4 times a week, played soccer, went to the gym, did martial arts, worrying with a heart condition that seemed impossible. Oh, and no priors of heart disease in the family. Fast forward to 8 months later, kept doing my workout routine, but didn't push myself to the limit as I used to. One day I was talking to a sergeant from health services, sorry for the weird translation, and I mentioned that condition to him. The guy was a 55-year-old sergeant, with a lot of experience, that was actually the head nurse at a well-known civilian hospital. Yes, he had 2 good paying jobs. This is what he said. What? Haha, don't worry about that. That was probably some misplaced electrodes. Misplaced electrodes in EKG cause those weird symptoms all the time. And I've seen how much you work out, those symptoms are not compatible with people that work out a lot. I was speechless. Spend the rest of the day doing a people I need to kill list because of that. A couple of months later I did another EKG, and some blood work and everything was fine. Heart rate around 43 BPM, normal athlete arrhythmia, cholesterol levels good, TL, DR. First EKG showed symptoms of chronic heart disease. Scared shitless for 8 months. Experienced nurse told me 8 months later that it was probably caused by misplaced electrodes in EKG. Did exams 2 months later. Everything was normal. I was once told by a doc that I was the most pronounced case of hyperreflexia. It's what they're looking for when they bang your knee. He had ever seen and referred me to a neurologist. I googled hyperreflexia and it said it could be motor neuron disease and none of those looked very appealing. I went to a neurologist and it turned out I was fine. This literally just happened today. I was out shopping with my wife and there was a flash in my vision, then a blind spot of significant size appeared lasting 30 minutes. I called the doctor in a panic thinking my retina was falling off. He had me come in, dilated my pupils and took many images with a machine. He looked at my retina from every angle and found nothing wrong and said I was fine. He asked if I had a headache and realized I had a small one. He said that can trigger minor and temporary vision issues, especially migraines. I realized that I tend to drink a lot of coffee in the AM and had yet to drink a single cup that day. I should seriously consider cutting back. That's what got you in this mess in the first place. You should probably drink more. I had a lump under my nutsack. The good news is I don't have cancer. Bad news is I still have a hernia. But it beats the ever-living crap, pun intended, out of cancer. I had most symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome. The fact that I will always be walking around like a zombie and not capable of proper thought scared me. Turned out I just had really crappy habits, mostly with diet and sleep. That stuff matters more than you think. Ugh, amen to that one. Stuff like chronic fatigue is scary as heck, because the only real treatment is learn to deal with it. Working out that it's mostly bad habits, while annoying, is a godsend. I could feel my heart beating in my chest and I couldn't swallow without feeling like my throat was closing up. Turns out I just had really bad heartburn. I had severe anginal pain, heart attack-like pain. Since I was 22 at the time, it freaked the heck out of me. It was so intense and debilitating I couldn't move. I just curled up in a ball and hoped I wasn't actually dying. Never found out what it was. Even now, studying medicine, the closest thing I can think of was a random spasm of the coronary arteries, the arteries that are clogged in the case of a heart attack. No lasting damage was done though. We practiced checking heart function with ultrasound machines last week and they tested it on me. Everything checks out. Sleep paralysis. This is scary crap. When it happens to me, it's usually during a nightmare. You're partially awake, you can hear and sometimes see what's actually going on, but your dream is interlaced with reality and you are absolutely paralyzed. You can't move or speak. It's terrifying. I had to make an emergency appointment with my GP because I was getting intense sharp stabbing pains in my chest and I couldn't breathe. The embarrassment of walking back into work and announcing that I wasn't having a heart attack. I had just pulled my muscle in my chest. I pulled my own tit. When I was 17 or 18 I noticed a hard lump on my lower back, on top of my spine but a little off center, and another about an inch up. I was a little confused. It hurt a little when you pressed on them but otherwise did nothing and caused me no grief. One day I showed my mom and she freaked and made me go to the doctor, which made me a little freaked as well. Turns out they were just lipomas and are pretty common, and now I have tons of them all over. It was just kind of random that the first ones I found were there on my back right around my spine, which made them seem more sinister than they actually are. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.